Metroid Prime 4 Beyond tries to be so many different things. There were moments where I thought it might be the strongest Prime since the very first, and others where it felt like the weakest. An outdated open-world hub connects breathtaking areas that brilliantly revisit the classic first-person exploration and lock-on shooting the series is known for. Talkative companions drop a few too many hints and one-liners, but they're redeemed by some memorable story moments and mostly charming personalities that even a crotchety Metroid fan like me warmed up to in the end.
Sarge, look! She's doing Morph Ball.
And thankfully, Retro Studios still mostly understands it's important to give Samus her alone time, with a relieving amount of exploration in total isolation. While some of what it attempts just doesn't work, far more of it does, resulting in an uneven but overall impressive revival that reaches incredible heights in its best moments. The story begins with Samus mysteriously teleporting to the planet Vuros, where she works to find a way home while also uncovering the history of the ancient Lamorne race. The hook this time around is Samus's new psychic abilities. These powers allow you to telekinetically manipulate certain objects, while also adding a new wrinkle to Samus's standard arsenal. They lead to all sorts of challenges that involve directing charge shots to hit multiple targets, using bombs as projectiles, and cool momentum-based morph ball platforming. The puzzles and suit upgrades are great overall, if a little familiar. I really enjoyed using the psychic abilities to find every last hidden item, even though they're mostly slight remixes of returning powers rather than something truly original. I can only recall a few times where a solution felt particularly novel, but that does include one awesome cinematic moment that really stands out. And when we're talking about the long-awaited continuation of one of the most acclaimed video game trilogies of all time, it's not a major complaint to say it's sticking relatively close to the script. Combat also feels exactly like you'd expect from a modern Prime, though it's not just a straight retread. You lock on and fire shots while strafing as usual, but Samus feels amazing to control here. You have a swift forward and backward dodge, improved maneuverability when popping out of the morph ball, and snappier access to your visor. You'll also gain flashy elemental weapons that are helpful in both combat and exploration. Choosing your weapon and fine-tuning your aim is still fun all these years later, despite its relative simplicity. Prime's combat has always fared best when sparse encounters are supplemental to exploration, which is the format Prime 4 follows most of the time, introducing new foes that require different tools to beat. The low points are when it does its best impression of a mid-2000s corridor shooter, occasionally focusing a bit too much on repetitive waves of enemies. At least those sections always end with something exciting, as the great lineup of boss battles is a nice mix of towering monsters and one-on-one shootouts. Samus's new motorbike is the other big addition. The way it's woven into the plot feels surprisingly natural, and it controls well. But what you'll actually use it for is one of Prime 4's biggest fumbles. You'll mainly ride around Soul Valley, this desert hub that serves as the middle ground between each major location, sort of like what Hyrule Field was in Ocarina of Time. It's mostly empty and uninteresting. The same few enemy types pop up when you're riding around, and all you do is fire a basic projectile or charge into them. Soul Valley isn't that big, so it at least doesn't take too long to get from point A to point B. The problem is that it's designed as if that N64 Hyrule Field saw the Great Plateau from Breath of the Wild and said, I can do that too. Prime 4 goes to great lengths to ensure you spend multiple hours riding across this drab desert just to reach the credits, almost like it's trying to justify the motorbike's inclusion. It sprinkles an extremely small number of Breath of the Wild-like shrines on the map that house optional upgrades. The bite-sized puzzles inside those shrines are fine, but there's no joy in discovering them, and it feels like a surface-level attempt to recapture Zelda's open-world magic that doesn't really work. This wouldn't be a huge deal, except Prime 4 ties a main objective to the desert. Samus has to collect enough green energy to preserve the history of the Lamorne, which is a very cool setup. But in practice, all that entails is mindlessly driving around and crashing into any green crystals you see. It's the type of runtime padding filler that had already outworn its welcome the last time a Metroid Prime game came out. And Prime 4 would be so much tighter without this quest, or even without its half-baked desert at all. It's far from a deal breaker since this mission is given to you very early on, meaning you can chip away at it while you're riding to your next destination, but it's certainly not fun regardless. The good news is that the places you're riding toward are full of the atmosphere and gameplay you came for. Lonely, haunting exploration through gorgeous, fully realized areas that each have their own detailed backstory to uncover. Structurally, the individual maps take after Prime 2 and 3's more self-contained approach rather than Prime 1's interconnected spiderweb. There is some backtracking involved, of course, but each region has just one entrance from the desert, and you'll finish most of its main objectives on your first visit. I was delighted to find that this format fills the traditional 3D Zelda-shaped hole in my heart, as each zone essentially acts like a huge dungeon. Explore, find a key upgrade, kill the boss with it, and leave. That's not to say it doesn't feel like Metroid. There are a few main quests and plenty of optional items I needed to come back for later. It's just that these two series have always shared a lot of the same DNA, and Prime 4 lands closer to the Zelda style. Every location stands on its own, which allows Retro to give each a unique vibe. Sometimes Samus is completely alone and it leans hard into the tense sci-fi horror of Alien. And sometimes she's accompanied by Galactic Federation companions through more scripted scenes that call upon the action tropes of its sequel, Aliens.
Samus, you made it! Let's take care of this!
This constant genre shifting across levels keeps things fresh for most of its roughly 15-hour runtime.
Alpha Squad, heads up! Pilots are attempting breach on your position!
In these dedicated areas, Prime 4 makes a case for itself as the best-looking game Nintendo has ever published. Its fantastical art direction is jaw-droppingly gorgeous at times, with incredible lighting, beautiful backgrounds, and the return of Samus's iconic visor effects. It sounds great too, with outstanding melodies throughout. To be clear, Prime 4 doesn't reach the heights of the best-looking games on other platforms, but a game this stunning, running at a flawless 4K 60 FPS on Switch 2, with a smooth 120 FPS option that lowers the resolution, is a huge step forward for Nintendo. And while the resolution downgrade while playing on Switch 1 is noticeable in comparison, it still runs at an impressive 60 FPS on the old hardware, and it's a totally viable way to play Prime 4 if you haven't upgraded yet. Some locations stand alongside my favorites in the series, and when you're methodically tiptoeing your way through one, Prime 4 more than lives up to the trilogy's legacy. An early highlight is Volt Forge, a gothic, futuristic factory set to a powerful rock soundtrack. It's impressive how its rich history is intertwined with its level design. You can just work your way through each room and enjoy the intricate layouts at face value, or you can scan every machine and learn why they exist and what they were used for, which provides fascinating context that makes complete sense when you see it all in motion. These places feel big, important, and carefully plotted out. That world building remains an incredibly special piece of Metroid Prime. Each region is fairly linear, with usually just one correct way to go, even if multiple choices are presented. When you stumble into a room with 3 doors, for example, it's likely that one is a save room, one is blocked until you get a new upgrade, and one is the way forward. I actually think this choice suits Prime very well, allowing it to focus more on mood, handcrafted tension, and distinct sequences. But it's a very different flavor than the non-linear design the Metroid series helped pioneer more than 30 years ago. This decision also makes Prime 4 feel like the best entry point into this series for new folks.
You're alone, on a planet, with no hope of survival.
Speaking of new folks, most regions contain one of several Galactic Federation companions who temporarily travel with Samus before heading back to base camp. Thankfully, these characters are far less intrusive than I initially feared after a particularly obnoxious tutorial section I saw in a preview demo.
That door just opened all by itself.
Their limited presence means they don't have amazing character arcs, a more than acceptable side effect. But they do have mostly likable personalities and provide a few highlights that give Prime 4 its own identity. It helps that the great voice acting and facial animations are another step forward for Nintendo.
Private First Class Nora Armstrong. It's an honor to meet you, Samus.
They could still use some work in the writing department, however, as they often fall back on well-worn action cliches,
It's gonna get hot in here.
or commentary that feels out of place.
I have no idea what we're doing, but it feels like it's working.
I'm grateful that they generally don't outright spoil specific puzzle solutions, but they do chime in a little more often than I'd like about where to go or what to do next.
Have you explored Vault Forge using your new abilities? Might be worth checking out.
Prime 4 lets you toggle on-screen tips that nudge you in the right direction, so I really wish I could turn off companion hints too. When you're together on a mission, which is a major part of the campaign, certain aspects can feel outdated as well, like waiting for someone to help you open a door, hearing repetitive combat dialogue lines,
Acquiring target.
or reviving them whenever they go down.
Keep them away from me!
Prime 4 keeps these portions in check by smartly knowing when to leave you alone entirely,
I'll hang back and try to open the gate from up here.
with multiple lengthy segments where Samus loses radio signal and no one can bother her.
Might be on your own from here. Good work.
You spend over half the runtime on your own, so if you're a longtime Metroid fan who craves ambience and isolation, there's plenty of that here too. Overall, the companions are tolerable. While there are still several moments that probably would have been more epic if Samus was alone, their inclusion does lead to some fun cinematic events that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Oh! Whoa! You are sneaky quiet, you know that?
One character who I actually wish was included more is Sylux, the big bad that doesn't play nearly as big a role in the story as I expected. It's another underdeveloped part of Prime 4, and it feels like he's only here out of reluctant obligation to Prime 3's post-credits tease from 2007. Instead, this story focuses far more on Lemorne history, which is very fascinating on its own, but it doesn't entirely make up for the feeling that something's missing. It doesn't take psychic powers to see the ideal vision Metroid Prime 4 Beyond was aiming for. It tries to mix the excellent Prime formula with a character-focused story and a large hub world to explore. It doesn't quite reach that ambitious goal, with an outdated open desert area that mostly feels like padding, and a cast of characters that provide both a handful of memorable moments and too much chatter at times.
Well, one door is still locked, the other one is malfunctioning. Hey, but it's progress!
But none of its issues come close to ruining Prime 4, which is still an excellent comeback thanks to incredible peaks that are almost entirely self-contained from its stumbles. It mostly knows when to leave Samus alone, and a significant chunk of this 15-hour adventure is spent in delightfully atmospheric solitude. It nails the essential elements of a Prime game that remain special decades later. Tense exploration through haunting locations, highlighted by amazing world building, breathtaking art direction, new twists on classic abilities, and flawless technical performance. Even though a few underdeveloped elements keep it from feeling as cohesive as its predecessors, Prime 4 reaches heights worthy of the Metroid name.
Executive Reviews editor Tom Marks here with Logan Plant, our reviewer of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, to talk a little bit more about his tastes, the review, some things we didn't talk about in the video review because, boy, this was a big one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Logan, you've, I'm sure, seen around. He reviewed Donkey Kong Bonanza, Hyrule Warriors, Age of Imprisonment more recently, Kirby Air Riders, a big Nintendo fan. But Logan, I think this is your first Metroid review because they don't make a lot of Metroid games anymore. So what's your history with the series? Why'd you want to review Prime 4?
Yeah, I love Metroid so much. I mean, I know the sales aren't always there, but to me, I just think about that Super Nintendo trio of Super Metroid, A Link to the Past, and Super Mario World, and that's still like the big three of Nintendo franchises to me, of just their classic pillar series. So when a Metroid comes along, yeah, I absolutely wanted to review it. I love Super Metroid. It remains my favorite in the series. I'd say I generally enjoy the 2D ones a little bit more than the Prime ones, but I still love the Metroid Prime trilogy. 2 is my favorite. I think I just love its light world, dark world concept. 1, I think, is the best overall. 3, I still really enjoy. It's a little bit more linear, kind of like Prime 4, but I love the entire series.
All right, let's ask the question that is the question. This is the big one. Obviously, you gave the game an 8. You think it's great despite some missteps here and there. But did it live up to the hype? Right, this is the big thing. We've been waiting for this for 8 years or whatever, and then 17 years since 3. Did it live up to the build-up, or is it just still great despite sort of the expectations that were put on it?
It's such a unique series, this first-person exploration about finding upgrades with Samus's iconic visor effects. Like, it's very, very different. Other games definitely take inspiration. The Batman Arkham games or the Star Wars Jedi games take a lot from Metroid Prime, but still, there's a flavor to this series that is so unlike anything else, even unlike the 2D games, which we've gotten a couple of with Samus Returns and Dread since the last Prime game. I wouldn't say it lived up to the hype because I just don't think anything can live up to this astronomical level of hype. But I'm very happy with how it turned out and that this game exists at all. I think kind of how I feel about Prime 4 is that besides visually, which is a huge graphical leap, if this game had just come out 3 years after Prime 3 and it was this, no one would bat an eye. It's just such a logical in-step progression of the Prime trilogy. And I mean that complimentary. Of course, some things it tries do not work at all, but it does feel like, hey, this is a very faithful sequel that's bringing Prime into the modern age, but it's still very much modern Metroid Prime. And I missed Metroid Prime, so I'm very happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, it's always funny trying to review a game with very high highs and very low lows, where you talk about how beautiful this game is, but also if you just show someone the desert, you're not necessarily going to be like, this is one of the most beautiful games Nintendo's ever made. So yeah, it's interesting how you have to sort of pick and choose, or not pick and choose, but balance those things in an overall review and an overall impressions.
Yeah, you mentioned really, really high highs and really low lows. It's like this one was so hard to pin down a score and write a review for, because there are moments that are a 10 or a 9. There are moments that are a 5 or a 6. It's how do you kind of grapple with all of that?
Yeah, and to be clear, we don't treat scores like math, right? So it's not like for every moment there's a 10 and every moment there's a 6. We balance to an 8, we average. That's not how this works. And it's also not like a game starts at a 10 and you take points away. So it can be tricky to find the middle spot. So one thing that didn't make it into the video review was a discussion about controls. And specifically, this game is Nintendo's first, I know it's not like literally first-person shooter, yada yada, we don't have to get into that debate, but this is a first-person shooter-ish game that has mouse controls, that uses the Switch 2's Joy-Con mouse controls, where you can just put it down on its side and use point and click like you would on a PC. So did you get to use that at all? Is that what you went with? How did you generally play this game?
Yeah, there are 3 main control schemes. There is Pro Controller with twin stick controls and a little bit of motion aiming for adjusting, kind of like Splatoon. A lot of different shooters do this, but that's the big Nintendo comparison. Then there is split Joy-Con controls, which plays just like Metroid Prime Trilogy or Metroid Prime 3 on Wii, where you are aiming with the right Joy-Con and using these 2 separate controllers like a Wii Remote and a nunchuck. And then there's the mouse controls, where at any time you can plop the mouse down to be a mouse on a surface, and it instantly recognizes that and puts a mouse cursor on your screen, which is cool. That's a cool implementation that it's not, this is mouse mode. You can only use the mouse in mouse mode. It is kind of fluid and you can swap back and forth. That being said, I used it for 10 minutes to test it out. It's just not comfortable enough. Like, you know this, Tom, from reviewing the Switch 2 and Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Like, as a mouse, it's functional, but not ideal, not that comfortable to hold. And a Metroid game has so many buttons you need to use. You need to grapple, you need to switch to the morph ball, you need to equip your scan visor or fire a missile, and it expects you to use face buttons on that mouse Joy-Con. Like, you reach over with a claw with your pointer finger or your thumb. So it's just not really there. It's a cool gimmick, I guess, if you want to try it out. But the Pro Controller and the twin Joy-Con control schemes work so well. I love how this game controls, that it's not a negative at all, that the mouse controls are kind of whatever.
It's a real shame to hear that, because that was part of my review. You can go check out my Switch 2 review where I talk about the mouse controls, right? Going into the Switch 2 generation, my worry was that this mouse, like the DPI, was going to be too low and it wasn't going to be accurate. And actually, the mouse is very accurate. It's a good
mouse.
It's a good mouse to play with. I mean, it's not a gaming mouse or whatever, but it is, it's good. And then the problem is actually just the functional. It is so uncomfortable to hold. And like you said, pressing face buttons while holding this little candy bar sized thing is so awkward. So it's a shame to hear that Prime doesn't really account for or solve those problems. But it's nice that you don't necessarily need it to enjoy this or whatever. Logan, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us a little bit more about your Metroid tastes, some stuff that didn't make it into the review, all that jazz. If you want more from Logan, his last review, like I said, was Kirby Air Riders. You can go check out that, another game he enjoyed quite a bit. Or if you want more of his thoughts on Metroid in general, go over to the IGN Games YouTube channel, where he's the host of our Nintendo podcast, NVC, Nintendo Voice Chat, where you can hear him talk about, they just did a retrospective on the Metroid Prime trilogy. So if you want a little bit more of his thoughts in depth about those games, the past games in the series, you can check that out. And for everything else, stick with IGN.